The morning sun cast a golden hue over the lavish suburban enclave known as Whispering Pines. It was a place where lawns were manicured to perfection and mailboxes stood like sentinels along pristine driveways, each house a testament to architectural ambition. Whispered secrets of domesticity and ambition. Yet beneath this veneer of tranquility simmered rivalries and unspoken rules, held tightly in the clenched fists of the Homeowners Association. In the heart of this neighborhood rested my modest abode, nestled near a cluster of towering oaks that rustled stories of resilience. I had chosen this place for its promise of peace, where the song of birds harmonized with the rustle of leaves, a balm for weary souls. But peace, I had learned, was a fragile thing. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, embodied the spirit of bureaucracy. With a fervor that rivaled a storm, her presence was like a gust of cold wind, sweeping through the neighborhood with the intent of rearranging everything in its path. Her latest decree. My property had been annexed as community land, a decision that she announced with the flourish of a conqueror planting a flag. The letter had arrived, inconspicuous in its white envelope, yet inside it bore a decision that crackled with the audacity of a lightning bolt. My land, with its swaying grasses and stubborn dandelions, was no longer my own. Karen's first move was not grandiose. A string of miniature flags appeared at the edges of my yard, fluttering like a fleet of tiny ships laying claim to new territory, each flag a testament to her resolve, their garish colors clashing with the gentle greens of my sanctuary. A lesser spirit might have been rattled, but I stood firm. My land was my fortress, and the walls of my resolve were not easily breached. I met Karen's silent challenge with the quiet strength of a mountain, unmoved by the winds that sought to erode it. When the flag-bearing stakes appeared one morning, planted with militant precision, I found myself smiling, not out of joy, but with the subtle amusement of someone who sees the absurdity of a game played in earnest. It was a dance of territory and ego, and I was prepared to play my part with grace. There were whispers among the neighbors, a gentle murmur of intrigue and speculation that floated through the air like the dandelion seeds Karen so despised, yet I remained a ghost in their conversations, content to observe the unfolding theater with a detached curiosity. In the quiet hours of the evening, as shadows stretched languidly across the lawn, I contemplated my next move. The solution came not as a flash of brilliance, but as a steady undertow of resolve. Electric fences, silent sentinels that hummed with the promise of resistance, would mark the boundaries of my dominion, a subtle reminder that even the most determined invader would find my land unyielding. As I moved through the days, assembling the pieces of my defense, I felt a kinship with the earth beneath my feet. We shared a quiet understanding, an agreement that we would not be conquered without consent. The hum of the fences, once installed, became a part of the landscape, a low, persistent murmur of defiance that echoed my own. And there, in the heart of Whispering Pines, I found my voice not in shouted declarations or petty reprisals, but in the quiet assertion of my right to stand my ground. In the end, Karen's flags were outmatched by the silent vigilance of electricity. The stage was set for the next act, where the boundaries of power and persistence would be tested in the shadows of those towering oaks. The moment Karen decided my garden was public property, the neighborhood's fate was sealed. The summer sun sat high, casting shadows through the blinds onto my desk as I reviewed yet another notice from the HOA. Off-white paper, black ink, bold letters, a new citation for yet another trivial violation. This time, my newly installed electric fence had become the target. The charge: endangerment of community safety. Ironic, considering safety was the very reason the fence existed. A sharp, metallic structure. It stood as a fortress against the encroachment of both misguided children and the relentless force that was Karen. Each morning, I would step onto my porch, coffee in hand, and take in the absurdity of it all. Lawns immaculately trimmed, hedges sculpted into unnatural perfection, a neighborhood that lived and breathed by Karen's commandments. But mine was the house that dared to defy. The electric fence hummed softly, a metallic guardian whispering defiance into the crisp morning air. Karen's influence was vast, almost cult-like. Her reign extended from the mailbox gossip network to the whispers shared over garden fences. She was an artist of manipulation, painting my image as the community's villain with broad strokes of exaggeration. Not that it mattered. I had long abandoned any hope for camaraderie among these manicured lawns. My focus was singular, reclaiming my land, my sanctuary. The fence was but a symbol, a silent manifesto against tyranny cloaked in pastel cardigans. I watched as neighbors walked by, their eyes darting towards my fortress of defiance. Some glanced with curiosity, others with disdain. Yet, it was the whispers I found most telling. The hushed tones shared between sips of morning coffee, a curiosity mixed with fear, respect tinged with resentment. They spoke of my fence like it was some mythical beast, an iron creature birthed from defiance. Karen's tactics were relentless. Flyers appeared overnight, taped to lampposts and tucked beneath windshield wipers. "Preserve our community," they read, urging unity against the dissent I supposedly bred. Lines of absurdity and accusation flowed freely, penned with the anger of a dozen petty grievances. And yet, beneath the surface, I sensed a shift. A quiet rebellion simmered among the ranks. Eyes that once watched with judgment now lingered with a hint of admiration. My fence had become more than a boundary. It was a testament to resistance, an electrified beacon that whispered courage to the disillusioned. Inside, I felt neither hero nor villain, but perhaps something in between. A quiet power thrummed in my veins, an understanding that change was a slow, relentless tide. As I sipped my coffee, I pondered the irony a garden claimed, a fence erected, and a community transformed by a single act of defiance. Karen, with her orchestrated chaos and polished smiles, underestimated the stubborn resolve of her adversary. Each citation, each whispered gossip, only strengthened my resolve. She was a force of nature. Yes, but so was I. With a deep breath, I returned indoors, leaving the fence to stand vigil. It hummed softly in my absence, a steadfast reminder that while Karen's reign was sprawling, it was not omnipotent. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the garden, I realized the battle had only just begun. The notice was pinned to the giant oak in the front yard, fluttering like a white flag of surrender. That wasn't mine. It declared, in the HOA's finest legalese, that my land was now community property, open to all for their picnics and walks, for their children to scamper across as though it had always been theirs, an act of theft, dressed in the finest bureaucratic fashion, with Karen's fingerprints all over it. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill my lungs. Outwardly, I remained calm. Inside, a storm brewed, not the wild, reckless kind, but the quiet, calculating fury of a chess player who sees the move 3 steps ahead. My property, now reduced to an open invitation, my carefully cultivated gardens, my sanctuary, laid bare to the whims of the neighborhood. The thought of their careless footsteps trampling over my life's work tightened a knot in my chest. Yet, I smiled inwardly. They had underestimated me. The next day, I began my work. Every action was deliberate, each step a calculated move on a chessboard only I could see. I documented everything, the changes I made, the justification behind each one, all neatly cataloged, ready for the inevitable showdown, gathering photographic evidence of each intrusion. I became an archivist of my own invasion. The installation of electric fences began under the guise of a new gardening project. Security enhancements, I noted in my logs. hidden among invoices for topsoil and rose bushes. The contractors came and went, their work cloaked by the natural chaos of earth moving and planting, wires embedded beneath the soil, the current just enough to deter the curious. Evenings were spent over a cup of tea, reviewing footage from my strategically hidden cameras. I watched Karen lead her troops onto my land, their laughter echoing through my headphones. It was like watching ants scurrying over a discarded picnic. The irony was not lost on me. Karen prided herself on her community standing, oblivious to the mounting evidence of her trespasses. Then came the day when the fences hummed to life, a subtle warning, invisible yet omnipresent, its presence known only to me. I waited, curious to see who would test its resolve first. It happened on a serene Sunday afternoon. A yelp, followed by the sudden retreat of a gaggle of trespassers, Karen's voice rising in confusion. A single line piercing the air. "What is this?" The irony of her bewilderment, the delicious justice of her discomfort, was a balm to my soul. Karen would come. I knew. A confrontation was inevitable, but I was prepared, documentation in hand, evidence meticulously collected. I was ready to play my part, the calm before the storm had ended, and the storm itself promised to be exhilarating. With each passing day, the neighborhood learned, the electric hum a reminder of boundaries, of lines that should never have been crossed. My land returned to me, not through force, but through the quiet power of persistence. Karen called a meeting. Of course, her voice on the phone, clipped and official, a summons rather than an invitation. I nodded to myself, feeling the weight of my preparations settle like a well-fitted coat. The stage was set, the final act ready to unfold, a game long played. Now, nearing its conclusion, I stepped onto my porch, the morning sun casting long shadows across the lawn. The world was silent, waiting, and in the quiet, I could almost hear the pieces moving, the checkmate inevitable. In the subdued embrace of dawn, the world seemed softer, as if nature itself was holding its breath. A light mist hovered over the lawn, where the electric fence stood resolute and unapologetic. Its stark lines etched against the soft morning light were like a silent promise. It had become an emblem of defiance and rightful ownership, a quiet testament to my resolve. I took a deep breath, feeling the chill of determination settle in my chest. The air buzzed with a sense of impending change as I sipped my coffee, watching from the window. The legal steps I had taken were meticulous, woven with the precision of a spider crafting its web. I had called in favors and consulted with those who knew the labyrinthine paths of property law. Research, phone calls, quiet meetings over documents that hummed with authority and intent. Each decision was a brick in the fortress I was building against the encroachment of the overzealous HOA. Karen, with her clipped tones and razor-sharp smiles, had outdone herself. The bold move to declare my property communal had been met with incredulous whispers, even among her allies. They knew, deep down, that she'd overreached. Yet, the allure of power was a siren's call too tempting for her to resist. Each time she paraded down the street, her presence was thunderous, commanding attention and submission from those who feared her wrath or coveted her favor. I was neither. Within my grasp were deeds, surveyor maps, and a legal team armed with the weaponry of justice. The quiet strength of the documents was a universe contained in ink and paper. They lay on my kitchen table like a silent army, waiting for the clarion call. The laws that Karen wielded like a blunt instrument were now my scalpel, precise and unyielding. The community, those who had watched with expressions as varied as the colors of autumn leaves, began to stir. Some nodded in approval, while others whispered behind closed doors, fearful of siding with either party but eager for resolution. It was an unspoken understanding that there was more at stake than a patch of land. It was a battle for autonomy, for the right to stand firm against arbitrary tyranny, Time stretched and contracted around me, each moment heavy with the significance of what was to come. The legal notice, a carefully crafted epistle of intent, was sent with the serenity of inevitability. Karen's reaction would be explosive, predictable yet satisfying. She would see it as a challenge, a gauntlet thrown with the elegance of a chess master's opening move. I was ready for her next play. The anticipation coiled within me like a spring. Taut and eager, the neighborhood buzzed with an energy barely contained, the air crackling with the silent storm brewing under the surface. I had not sought war, but peace demands its warriors. I would stand firm behind my fences, my fortress of law and resolve, and watch as the tides shifted. The transformation was subtle, yet definitive, like the first light of dawn breaking over a dark horizon. As the sun rose higher, dispelling the mist and bathing the world in clarity, I knew my course was set. The quiet power I wielded was a force of nature, as inevitable as the turning of the seasons. In that moment, I was more than just a homeowner. I was the architect of my destiny, and the fence was but the beginning. The morning sun filtered through the trees, casting long shadows on the grass that had once been mine, then theirs, and now, uncertainly, mine again. The air was crisp, tinged with the sharp scent of the previous night's rain. I stood by the fence, my creation, the electric guardian that hummed gently with stored power, a silent reminder of rebellion against tyranny. Karen had been quiet since the last meeting. Her voice, once a constant stream of grievances, had retreated. Silence can be a weapon, too. I had learned, yet there was satisfaction in seeing her reduced from a storm to a whisper. The neighborhood had shifted its winds. I looked at the fence, its wires catching the sunlight like threads of a spider's web. It was a boundary, a declaration, not just of land, but of self. I'd never been one for confrontation, yet here I stood, a testament to change, against all odds. It was funny. In a way, how the simplest of actions could uproot so much. The community had begun to stir. Neighbors ventured timidly past, casting curious glances that held both admiration and unease. I wondered if they saw me differently now. Were their nods of acknowledgement laced with respect or apprehension? Perhaps both. Power shifts, even subtle ones, alter perceptions in ways one cannot always predict. I remembered the first time Karen had marched up my driveway, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp as cut glass. She had spoken of rules, of order, of community standards that felt more like chains than guidelines. Somewhere along the way, her vision for unity had twisted into something else, a dominion, an empire of compliance. In reclaiming my land, I had inadvertently loosened her grip on others. There was a poetry in that, an irony that bordered on cosmic justice. Even now, her influence waned. The HOA meetings, once battlegrounds, had transformed into dialogues. There was talk of a new charter, one that respected individual freedoms, a balance. It seemed Karen's overreach had kindled a quiet revolution. I stepped back, feeling the rough bark of a tree against my palm, grounding me in the present. The wind whispered through the leaves, a gentle lullaby that masked the distant drone of a lawnmower. Life continued, indifferent and yet profoundly altered. The electric fence hummed with a promise of protection, of vigilance. And then a figure emerged from the shadows of a nearby hedge. Karen, her stride less assured, her aura diminished. She paused, taking in the fence, its silent testament to defiance. Her eyes flickered with something resentment, perhaps, or reluctant respect. It was hard to tell. She spoke, a single line, the first since the storm of our conflict had reached its apex. Her voice, once a commanding siren, now softened, almost contemplative. "You've changed things?" A declaration, not just of observation, but perhaps of reluctant acknowledgement. It hung in the air like a suspended cord, awaiting resolution. I met her gaze, unflinching. Yes, I had changed things. We had changed things. Together, though not as allies, but as catalysts in a narrative of transformation. Her departure was silent, her shadow retreating into the embrace of the morning light. As she left, I felt the air shift, lighter somehow. The electric fence buzzed quietly behind me, a sentinel of autonomy. The neighborhood exhaled a collective sigh of relief and possibility. I turned back to my garden, each blade of grass a testament to persistence, to resilience. In the days that followed, the community found its rhythm. Karen's presence, now more a memory than a force, lingered like the last notes of a fading song, but harmony had returned, albeit in a new key, and in that melody, I found peace.